It was past midnight when the doorbell rang, but that wasn't what woke me. What woke me was the silence that followed, the kind of silence that happens when people stop breathing at the same time. I was already standing at the top of the stairs before I heard my daughter whisper, "Dad, what did you do?" The truth is, I didn't do anything, not yet. I just stopped letting things be done to me. My name is Frank. I'm 68 years old. I spent 40 years laying bricks, not the fancy kind, the kind that holds buildings together so people don't think about them. I built schools, libraries, the courthouse downtown. My hands look like river rocks now, knuckles swollen, fingers bent at angles that don't quite straighten. I raised my daughter Claire in a house I bought with cash. Every brick, every beam, every nail I drove into that place came from my back, my knees, my overtime. When my wife Margaret passed 7 years ago, cancer that moved too fast for anyone to keep up, I thought the house would be where I'd heal, where I'd sit on the porch and watch the years go quiet. Claire was 23 then. She came home for the funeral, stayed 3 weeks, held my hand, cried into my shoulder. I remember her saying, "This house is all we have left of her, Dad. We'll never let it go." I believed her. She met Derek 6 months later. Derek sold insurance. He had clean fingernails and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The first time I met him, he shook my hand too firmly, like he was testing something. Then he looked past me, into the living room, and I watched his eyes measure the square footage. "You've got a good amount of equity here," he said. I remember thinking, equity, not home, not memories, equity. But Claire was happy, or she seemed happy, and when your child smiles, you want to believe it's real. The first time Derek brought up his parents moving in, it was casual, too casual. "They're just in a tight spot, Frank. A few months maybe, just until they get back on their feet." I told him no, not because I'm cruel, because I know how these things work. A few months becomes a year becomes, well, they're comfortable now. And before you know it, you the one making coffee in your own kitchen while someone else decides where the furniture goes. Claire didn't speak to me for 2 weeks after that. Then she showed up on a Tuesday with groceries I didn't ask for and a face I didn't recognize. "You being selfish," she said. I was sitting in Margaret's chair, the one she picked out in 1992 from a catalog she'd kept folding in her purse for months. "Selfish? They have nowhere to go, and you're sitting in this house with 3 empty bedrooms." I looked at her. "Those rooms aren't empty. They're full of your mother." Her jaw tightened. I could see her fighting something. Empathy, maybe, or guilt. I couldn't tell anymore. "Mom would have wanted us to help people," she said. I stood up slowly. "Your mother would have wanted you to ask me like you're my father, not like I'm an obstacle." She left. Didn't hug me, didn't look back, just left. But then something changed. Derek started coming over alone, not to visit, to assess. He'd walk through the house like an appraiser, open closets, check the basement. Once, I found him in the attic going through boxes of Margaret's things. "Just looking at the insulation," he said. I told him to leave. He smiled and said, "Of course." He didn't see what was coming. A week later, Claire showed up with a key I didn't give her. She'd made a copy years ago when she was still the kind of daughter who'd let herself in to make me dinner. That day, she didn't come to make dinner. "We're moving them in on Saturday," she said. "We've already told them." I stood in the kitchen. The afternoon light was hitting the counter I'd installed myself in 1995. Margaret had stood at that counter every morning for 20 years, drinking tea from a mug that said, "World's okayest mom." "You're moving them into my house?" "Our house," she said. "It's our house, Dad. You always said it would be mine someday." "Someday," I repeated. "Not today." She folded her arms, the way she used to when she was 15 and I told her she couldn't go to that party. "You don't need all this space. You barely go upstairs anymore. Your knees, my knees are fine. You can't even..." And that's when it got worse. Derek walked in without knocking,
just opened the front door and stepped inside like he already owned the place. He had a folder under his arm, official looking. "Frank," he said, all charm and teeth, "we need to talk about power of attorney." I stared at him. Power of what? Claire wouldn't meet my eyes. "We're worried about you, living alone, your health. We think it's time to make some arrangements." I understood then, all at once, like a wall coming down. They weren't asking to move his parents in. They were moving me out. Or worse, they were moving me aside, making me the guest in my own life. This is where everything flipped. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at Claire until she finally met my eyes, and I said, "You want to make arrangements? Let's make arrangements." She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "you should talk to a lawyer before you move anyone into a house that isn't yours." Derek laughed. It was short, nervous. "Frank, this house is in my name," I said, "fully, free and clear, bought and paid for, with no co-signers, no joint ownership, and no clause that says my daughter gets to decide when I'm too old to matter." The room got very quiet. Claire's face went pale, not because she didn't know, because she had known. She just thought I'd never use it. What happened next, no one expected. They moved them in anyway. Saturday morning, 8 a.m., a moving truck, Derek's parents standing in my driveway with boxes labeled kitchen and bedroom. Derek's father, a man named Bill, who'd spent his life making decisions other people cleaned up, walked up to my porch and said, "We'll try to stay out of your way." I was standing in the doorway, coffee in my hand, watching. "You're not staying in my way. You're staying in my house." He smiled, like I'd made a joke.
Claire came up behind him. "Dad, just let this happen. It'll be fine." I looked at her. "You have until Monday." "What?" "Monday morning. I'm calling the sheriff." Derek stepped forward. "You can't just..." "I can. I built this house. I paid for this house. And you," I said, looking at him, "don't get to decide when I stop living in it." He opened his mouth, closed it. Then he did something I'll never forget. He looked at Claire like it was her problem to solve. She didn't say anything. So they moved in. Boxes stacked in the living room, Margaret's photographs moved aside, my favorite chair pushed against the wall to make room for a couch that smelled like someone else's cigarettes. I stayed in my bedroom, door closed, phone in my hand. But I had something they didn't know about. 4 years ago, when Margaret first got sick, I went to a lawyer. Not because I expected any of this, because Margaret made me. She was always the one who thought ahead, who saw the cracks before they became breaks. "Get everything in writing," she said from her hospital bed. "Don't leave anything to hope." So I did. The house was put into a trust, a simple one. I was the trustee, Claire was the beneficiary upon my death. But there was one clause Margaret insisted on, one she made the lawyer add after we'd signed everything else. If Frank is ever removed from his primary residence without his written consent, she'd said, her voice thin but clear, the trust reverts to full ownership by him and the beneficiary designation is voided permanently. The lawyer had looked at her. You understand what that means. She wouldn't inherit. Margaret had smiled. It was the last real smile I ever saw on her face. Then she shouldn't throw him out. I didn't want to use it. I sat in my bedroom for 2 days, listening to Derek's mother rearrange my kitchen, listening to Bill argue with Derek about money in my living room, listening to Claire laugh at something I couldn't hear in a house I'd built for her to grow up in. I waited. I waited for her to come to my door and say, "I'm sorry." I waited for her to see what was happening and stop it. Sunday night, I walked into the kitchen to make tea. The kitchen Margaret had planned. The kitchen I'd stayed up late installing, night after night, while Claire slept in the room next door. Derek's mother was at the stove, using my pots, my stove, my kitchen. "Oh," she said, not moving, "we're making dinner. You can eat in your room if you want."
I didn't say anything. I just looked at the stove, at the pots, at the photograph of Margaret that used to be on the wall, now sitting on the floor by the trash can. I picked up the photograph, walked back to my room, and I called my lawyer. "Monday," he said, "first thing." I nodded. Monday. What happened next, no one expected. Monday morning, 9 a.m., the sheriff's car pulled into the driveway. I was standing in the living room, coffee in my hand, watching. Claire was in the kitchen. Derek was still in bed. Bill and his wife were at the table, eating eggs from my stove, using my plates. The knock came, solid, official. Claire answered the door. Her face went through about 6 different expressions before she landed on something between confusion and fear. "Can I help you?" The sheriff, a woman named Reyes, who I'd known for 20 years, held up a document. "I'm here regarding a property dispute. Is Frank Morrison here?" Claire turned, saw me standing in the living room. Her face crumbled into something I didn't want to see. "Dad?" I walked to the door. Not fast, not slow, just steady. "I'm here, Sheriff." She nodded. "Mr. Morrison, I've got a court order here regarding the removal of unauthorized occupants." Derek came down the stairs then, still in his pajamas. "What the hell is going on?" Bill stood up from the table. His wife put her fork down slowly. "This house," I said, looking at Claire, "is in a trust, my trust, and the terms of that trust are clear. If I'm removed from this property without my consent, everyone who isn't me gets removed." Claire's eyes went wide. "You wouldn't." "I didn't want to. I asked you to stop. I asked you to respect the word no." "Dad!" "You moved them in anyway." Derek stepped forward. "This is ridiculous. You can't just—" Sheriff Reyes held up the document again. "I can, sir, and I am. The court has determined that Mr. Morrison was displaced from his primary residence without consent. The trust's terms are enforceable. You have 1 hour to vacate." The room went silent, and that's when it got worse. Claire looked at me, not with anger, with something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Something that looked like the moment a child realizes the world doesn't work the way they thought it did. "You're choosing this house over me?" I stepped closer, close enough to see the tears she was trying to hold back. "No," I said, "I'm choosing not to be erased. I'm choosing the home your mother and I built. I'm choosing the boundaries you decided didn't apply to you. They're family. So am I." She broke then. The tears came. Her hands shook. Derek grabbed her arm. "Let's go. We don't need to stay here." But she pulled away from him, looked at me, really looked. "You could have told me about the trust." "I did. When you asked me to sign over the deed 2 years ago and I said no, you should have wondered why." She blinked. "I thought you were just being stubborn." "I was being your mother." That hit her. I saw it land, the weight of it. Margaret, who had seen something I didn't want to see, who had protected me from a future I couldn't imagine. This is where everything flipped. Bill and his wife packed quietly. Derek stormed around the house, slamming doors, throwing things into bags. But Claire stayed in the living room, watching me. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "you leave. And when you're ready to be my daughter instead of someone who manages me, you come back." "That's it?" "That's it." She looked at the house. The stairs she'd slid down on cardboard, the wall where I'd marked her height every birthday, the kitchen where her mother had taught her to bake bread that never quite rose. "I didn't think you'd fight back." I sat down in my chair, the one they'd pushed aside, the one I'd pulled back to the center of the room. I didn't think I'd have to. They left at 11:47 a.m. I watched the moving truck pull away, watched Derek's car follow it, watched Claire's car sit in the driveway for a long time before the engine finally started. She didn't look back, but she didn't leave fast either. I sat in my chair for an hour after they were gone, just listening to the house, the refrigerator hum, the clock on the wall, the silence that wasn't empty, it was mine. I walked through each room. I put Margaret's photograph back on the wall. I moved my chair to the window where I could see the garden she'd planted. I made tea in the kitchen, using the stove that still worked, the counter I'd installed, the mug that said, "World's okayest mom." And I thought about what Margaret had said the last time I visited her in the hospital. "You're too kind, Frank. You always have been. But kindness without boundaries is just giving people permission to take." I never understood that until now. 3 weeks later, Claire showed up alone. She sat on the porch with me, didn't apologize, didn't explain, just sat. We watched the sun go down, and after a long time, she said, "I forgot you were a person, not just my dad, not just the house, a person who gets to say no." I didn't say anything. I just poured her a cup of tea. She came back the next week and the week after that. We didn't talk about Derek. We didn't talk about the trust. We talked about her mother, about the garden, about the summer she learned to ride a bike in the driveway. Slowly, she started to see me again, not as an obstacle, not as a problem to manage, as her dad, the man who built this house, the man who still had a say in how his life went. Karma doesn't forget, it just waits.